It's taken more than a decade of fighting, but today children from Corby who are exposed to toxic chemicals finally claimed victory.
It's a tragedy which has its roots in the clean-up of the former steelworks, work carried out for the Borough Council in the late 80s and early 90s. Last year, the High Court decided the work released poisonous dust into the air which could have caused the birth defects. Today, the Council agreed to drop its challenge to that ruling and will now pay compensation to the children. Joel Mapp is in Corby now.
Yes, Stuart, these sheds behind me are all that remain of Corby's steelworks, once the heart of Corby itself, a town built on steel. Once this site stretched for more than a mile towards the centre of Corby, a third of the size of the town. But try to imagine what it would have been like 15 years ago when the council was trying to clear up the site and redevelop it. It would have been noisy, it would have been dusty, there would have been lots of lorries transporting that toxic waste out of here and out of these gates. We already know that toxic dust caused birth defects for 19 children. Today, the council finally said sorry and promised that compensation. 13 years ago, Conor McIntyre was born with a deformed hand. Since then, he's endured 20 painful operations and he's been bullied. Today, at a news conference held by his family's lawyer, he finally got an apology and the promise of a better life.
The Corby Borough Council has agreed to reach an out-of-court settlement with the families, to pay a one-off lump sum as compensation for their suffering, to apologise for what has gone on as a result of their negligent clean-up of the land, and to drop their challenge to last year's High Court ruling in the Court of Appeal.
Most of the 19 families were at today's event. With frail hands, they clutched new hope.
Been waiting for our apology for 11 years, so it's just good to get our apology.
The apologies means more than gold to me. It has done from day one and it will do. I will frame the apology. We didn't need the money, we don't want the money. It was the apology that means more to me than anything.
The agreement was reached after a landmark High Court ruling last year, which concluded Corby Council's clear-up of the town's old steelworks had been negligent. Uncovered transport lorries had released toxic dust into the air, which was inhaled by pregnant women.
In terms of thalidomide and toxic waste in the Ivory Coast and Erin Brockovich, all of them settled without going to trial. So this is the first time that a court has said that there is a link between toxic dust and birth defects.
The family's legal fight has lasted 10 years. It's been bitter and there are many scars. But today marks the end of their fight and the start of a new life. Now, to put this into context, it is the largest child poisoning case since thalidomide. We don't know how much each family is being paid in compensation. That will not be disclosed, but we're told it's not an eye-watering amount, yet a fair reflection of the hardship they've endured. Children like George Taylor, and Kim Riley now has his story.
George Taylor was born in Corby. He's 18 now. Soon after his birth, the family moved back to Scotland. After many operations, his hands tell their own story.
I also got all that removed and then the middle finger stuck back on here.
If a raindrop fell on the back of his hand, it could make him cry. It was so painful. It was very, very sensitive. I think that George and the other children are entitled to every penny that they get, and more possibly, because you'll never ever be able to compensate for what George or the other children have gone through, or what they will continue to have to go through in later years.
George has always wanted a frank admission from the council.
I want them just to own up and just say that we know that we cut corners. We tried to save cash. So I want them just to say that it was their fault and that they accept everything they've done was wrong.
Across the Atlantic, the plight of George and the other young people of Corby has come to the attention of Erin Brockovich. She fought a legal battle against a power company over claims that it had poisoned the water supply.
George rocks. Life can be so difficult for those of us that are healthy and have every opportunity to enjoy it, let alone be born with disabilities, and to overcome that, he's done the greatest job of all already, and he is where he is today. And I say to him, the future is only going to get brighter.
George says compensation will bring independence and allow him at last to move on. Kim Riley, BBC Look East.
Joel, however much the compensation is, it's the taxpayer who's ultimately going to have to foot the bill, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. We may never know exactly what that sum is that the council is having to pay out. Remember, it's not just the families they have to pay, it's their solicitors as well. They've been spending 10 years on this case, so it's likely it will run into the millions, and the council has said that it will be passed on to council taxpayers. For every £1 million in compensation, £5 extra each household in Corby for the next 20 years. So the closure of these steelworks, it seems the cost of that will run far into the future.
Joel, thank you very much. The story of the families and their fight for compensation will be featured in a BBC documentary on Sunday. As part of that programme, David Whiteley spoke to the Chief Executive of the Borough Council before the settlement today. He asked him whether he accepted the High Court ruling last year.
I accept some of what the judge said, as I freely admit. You know, there were times when standards were breached, or, you know, barrel washers and things probably weren't working as well as they might have been. And you would find that on any reclamation programme. I dispute the fact that there was such widespread negligence, and I think the judgment went far too far in that direction. But yes, there was some evidence of negligence, there was some fault, and potentially some blame. But you know, I think you have to look at it in the round, and I wouldn't want to sort of criticise anybody for what they did at that time.
Do you have a figure in mind as to what you can afford to pay, or you are prepared to pay?
Well, in fairness, we can afford to pay nothing at this moment in time, because we, like every public body in the country, are under pressure. We've got huge commitments to the regeneration of Corby, which again is benefiting the claimants and the wider population. But yeah, we have a figure in mind. We've made provision for a settlement, and we just hope we can arrive at a figure that is such that everybody can feel that this has been brought to a satisfactory conclusion. I don't think anybody is ever going to feel happy with whatever outcome we get.
Do you, as Corby Borough Council, have a figure in mind for compensation?
We've made a provision, including some of the fees that we have still to settle, to go to a figure pushing towards that 8-figure settlement. So we're not prepared to pay that sort of money, but taking account of legal bills in the pipeline, the costs of our barrister and so on for the next stage, we've made quite a sizable provision potentially.
That's going to make a hell of a dent in your funding for Corby.
It will, but you know, we worked really hard to bring in money for Corby. This year we brought in 25 million for new housing, including new council housing. So we are trying to stay ahead of the game, really.
You mentioned earlier that you have sympathy for the families. Do you think you would ever go so far as to apologise for what they've been through?
I think if the cause, no, I apologise for what they've gone through. You know, I feel sorry for what they've suffered.
But would you
apologise for the councils?
Do you not accept any responsibility for the fact that they are in this situation? Do you not accept?
As we speak, my view is that the council was not guilty of mismanagement of that reclamation programme, so the council itself is not directly responsible. But do I feel a sort of a collective responsibility that people in Corby have suffered from these sorts of health conditions? Then yes. You know, we feel a collective pain in Corby, because Corby's that sort of town. It's a very close-knit community, and everybody looks out for everybody else. So yes, I think everybody in that sense is sympathetic, and everybody would want to see these young people, young adults in some cases now, receive compensation and go on to live better, more fulfilled lives as a consequence.
Why have you decided to mediate now when you could have done this before even going to court in the first place? This could have all ended a long time ago.
Hindsight's a wonderful thing, and yes, we could have mediated and settled it. And I like to think the majority of people in Corby who know how we work and the style of the council believe that we had we sort of set the parameters of this, would have set them differently.
And you can see that document